Hello everybody, welcome you guys back to my channel. In today's video, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the dangers of using a sawzall. Alright, before we get started, there have been a lot of requests by my viewers on YouTube. One was by Whitney and Justin. I'd like to give them a shout out to my channel and thank you guys for joining my channel and thank you guys for subscribing to my channel. Okay. Alright, so before we get started, I would like to give you guys a little bit of a notice about what's going on. Today, as you guys can tell, I do sound a little bit sinusy. If you guys will excuse that, I sounded sinusy for a couple of days now from the beginning, and as you can see, I sounded real sinusy from the beginning a couple of days now. And so, as you guys can tell, it's been really rough and tough. Okay, all right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the dangers of using a sawzall. Okay, so what we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about the dangers of using a sawzall. Okay, so all right, so here we go. Let's get started. So using a sawzall is really dangerous. Okay, let's take a look at the components of a sawzall. Okay, so what we have here is the body of the sawzall. We have also here to your left is we also have the blade of the sawzall. This is the blade of the sawzall. This right here is the body of the sawzall. You also have the cord of the sawzall, the cord of the unit, and then you also have a little trigger which you pull, which is something you pull back here. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the dangers of using a sawzall. We're going to talk about things you should and should not do when it comes to using a sawzall. Okay, all right, so the first thing that you should do when using a sawzall is you should have some ear protection and some eye protection. Okay, so what we have here is we have a pair of goggles. Okay, these are this right here is a pair of safety goggles. So how they fit on your face is they just fit on your face like this. They fit on your face just like this. They do fit over your glasses. So they do fit over your glasses just like this. And so what else you can do now, excuse me everybody, what you can do next is you can take your helmet right here. This is basically for head protection as well. All right, this is your fire helmet. So what I'll do with this is I'll put this on top of my head. This will protect my ears and my neck. This will protect my ears and my neck. You know why? It's because it's got that little Nomex ear thing around the base of the helmet, and it's got that little Nomex ear thing around the base of the helmet, and that's what keeps my neck from getting cut. All right. So here's this. So when it comes to using a sawzall, you have to understand ear protection and neck protection is really key. All right. Also hand protection. Okay. You have to wear gloves when you're using a sawzall, okay? Now, don't worry, okay, because there are gloves out there that can get cut, all right? There are gloves out there that have been used for when you're using a sawzall, all right? I'm gonna take these goggles off so that you guys can see my face a little bit better. I'm gonna take these goggles off a little bit so you guys can see my face a little bit better. I do have some glasses on, so guys, please be aware of what you're wearing when you're using a sawzall. Okay, all right. So when you're using a sawzall, the first thing you want to make sure you're aware of is this. You want to make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. Okay, if you're in a dry environment, like if you're in a dry environment where it's real dry out, basically the sawzall can be used in those types of environments. Okay, now, when you're using a sawzall in wet conditions, like if you're using it out in the rain or out in wet, like if you're around a mud puddle that's real wet, basically you don't want the sawzall to get wet. All right. Now here's the reason why. Okay. If you look at the sawzall, at the end of the sawzall, you have a plug. Okay. This right here is your wire plug. Okay. Your sawzall has to be plugged up whenever you're using it. Okay, now whenever you're using the sawzall, you have to be aware of your surroundings. Okay, now sometimes if you think about it, some sawzalls that you have today have a blade that comes with them. Okay, now when you're dealing with the blade, you want to make sure that you have gloves on. Okay, you want to make sure that you have gloves on. Okay, so another thing that you want to make sure that you are aware of is when you're dealing with a sawzall, you have to wear gloves. Okay, you have to wear gloves, or else this thing right here is gonna cut your hand off. okay? Now, if you're dealing with a sawzall that has a really bad blade, like a broken blade, you want to make sure that you replace that blade as soon as possible, okay? You want to make sure that you replace that blade as soon as possible, okay? So another thing I wanted to tell you guys about this sawzall is this. This sawzall is called a Craftsman, okay? This is a Craftsman sawzall, okay? So my dad, he uses Craftsman tools a lot. So my dad is wanting a new sawzall that he can just snap the blade in there and it doesn't come out, okay? The thing that we have to use is we use what is called a socket wrench. No, we use what is called an Allen wrench. Basically what happens is, as you're putting the blade in there, as you're putting the blade inside this little part right here, as you're putting the blade in there, what happens is there's something in there, you see. What you're doing is you're putting the blade in there, and that's what's going to cause your blade to get bent, okay? So basically with this sawzall, you have to use an Allen wrench to put the blade on, okay? That's really what's not a good thing about this sawzall, okay? When you're definitely working around with the blade of the sawzall, you want to make sure that you have gloves on, okay? You want to make sure that you have gloves on, okay? When you're using a sawzall, okay, make sure you have gloves on, okay? A sawzall is like a really huge vibrator, okay? It's like a huge vibrator, okay? It vibrates really rapidly, okay? Sawzalls feel very comfortable when you're holding them, okay? When you're holding the sawzall, you want to make sure that you're holding it like this, okay? You want to make sure that you're holding it like this, all right? When you're using the sawzall, you want to make sure that you're going down with the sawzall. You want to make sure that you're putting pressure on whatever you're cutting, okay? Now, if you don't use the sawzall correctly, there are failures and a couple of errors that can occur when it comes to using a sawzall, okay? Now, after this video has uploaded, you might want to show this video to your kids, okay? Because using a sawzall can come with extremely rare, extremely dangerous consequences, all right? Let's talk about things you should and should not do with a sawzall first, all right? Let's talk about things you should and should not do, okay? Things you should do with a sawzall. You want to make sure that you have gloves on, okay? Please wear gloves when you're using a sawzall, okay? Because you don't want to deal with the blade of the sawzall without any gloves on, okay? You want to make sure that you have a glove on when you're dealing with the blade of a sawzall, all right? Because otherwise, or else, this thing is going to cut you, okay? That's going to cut you, and that's going to cause really bad injuries to occur, okay? As we dig into the holiday season, you know, a lot of people are using the sawzall out there today to put rebar in the ground, to put rebar in the ground, to put PVC pipes together in an arch. A lot of people do that, okay? And so that's what you're going to get, all right? Another thing, too, a sawzall is not a toy, okay? A sawzall is not a toy. So don't use the sawzall as a threat, okay? Don't use the sawzall as a threat, okay? One thing that people do most of the time, most stupid people do out here these days, is they go around chasing people with these things, okay? You don't want to chase anybody with a sawzall, because chasing somebody with a sawzall can come with extremely bad consequences, okay? That can come with extremely bad consequences, okay? Using the sawzall the incorrect way will result in injury or death, okay? Possibly death, all right? Now, this sawzall right here is not a toy, okay? This sawzall here is not a toy, all right? This sawzall is not a toy, and you should not use it as a threat, okay? So let's take a look at the exterior of the sawzall real quickly as you look at it, okay? So, some people might think the sawzall is a gun, okay? It's not a gun, but it just looks like a gun to me, okay? But it's just a sawzall, okay? You can see the trigger's located right here at the back, and you can see on the side, you can see that's where the motor can breathe out the hot air at, okay? So don't ever use a sawzall as a threat, okay? don't ever threaten anybody with a sawzall, okay? That's really bad, okay? If you threaten somebody with a sawzall, say that you're going to chase, let's say this. Let's use Pastor Curry's wife as an example. Let's say this. Let's say that me and her got into an argument, okay? Let's say that me and her got into a really serious argument about who was cutting cutting the rebar, okay? Say Miss Annette's going to do it, okay? I tell her no, all right? I tell her no, okay? And so I tell her no, that she's not going to do it because the sawzall is extremely dangerous and I know how to use it. Well, she says, Will, you do not know how to use a sawzall. Well, I tell her, yes, that's talking back, all right? That's talking back. And another thing that happens is if you run after somebody with the sawzall, you might trip, okay? You might trip. You might know that you're going to trip, okay? That sawzall right there is extremely deadly, okay? That sawzall is extremely deadly, and you cannot use that as a threat, okay? You put the blade in there. You see, if you chase somebody with the sawzall, this blade will stick out, and it can prick somebody in the eye, okay? It could take someone's eye out, okay? It could take someone's eye out completely, okay? That's really some stuff that you should and should not do with a sawzall, okay? So let's say this. So if you got into an argument with your wife, if you got into an argument about who was using the saw, that would not be a good idea, okay? Just say, Miss Annette, you're using the sawzall because I don't know how to use it, okay? Miss Annette, you're using the sawzall, so I'm going to hand it to you because you know how to use it, all right? Miss Annette, I don't know if you know how to use the sawzall, but if you don't know how to use a sawzall, I'm just using you as an example in this video, okay? I'm just using you as an example in this video, okay? So this is just an example of what happens if people are stupid out there that don't know when using a sawzall. It can be a really extreme threat, okay? Now, don't ever chase anybody with a sawzall, okay? Because sawzalls are extremely dangerous and they will cause injury or death, okay? So, when it comes to using a sawzall, you have to use it the correct way, all right? Ladies and gentlemen, when you're using the sawzall, like I said before, you have to wear gloves whenever you're using the sawzall, okay? Whenever you're using the sawzall, you have to wear gloves, okay? For my safety and your safety, all right? Now, another thing that you should wear are goggles, okay? These are goggles right here. These are called safety goggles, or these are called eye safety goggles, okay? These goggles right here will protect your eyes from the elements of the sawzall, the ailments of the sawzall, okay? That's what you're going to get when it comes to using a sawzall, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, so don't ever use the sawzall as a threat, and don't ever chase anybody with a sawzall, because that's going to result in really serious consequences being done against you, okay? You might have a charge of terroristic threats and terroristic violence against you. You might have a felony against you. You might have assault against you, assault with a deadly weapon against you. You might have different other stuff against you, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, please don't use a sawzall as a threat, okay? Say that you're going to chase someone with a sawzall because they ticked you off and because they told you you're late at church, all right? Don't use the sawzall as a threat, okay? I've learned that from my parents. I learned this from my parents. This is from my parents' perspective, not from Tom, Dick, and Harry's perspectives, or not from Alicia Cara's perspectives. This is just a video to help you understand about the sawzall's deadly consequences, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this video today, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this little video today. So, ladies and gentlemen, that should do it for today's look. That should do it for today's look at the sawzall and consequences for using it the improper way and the correct way. So, ladies and gentlemen, that should do it for today's look at the sawzall. Have a great day.